All right, folks, so we are recording now. All right, here. All right, there we go. Now everything's working. So our topic tonight was going to be something else, but this kind of came up in the last few days about how important and urgent this is. So we're going to talk about the DWR's upcoming workshops, what that means for the Delta, for us, and everything. So first of all, what is DWR? It is the Department of Water Resources for the state of California. These right here are the folks in charge, and their major responsibilities include overseeing the statewide process of developing and updating the California Water Plan. You might have heard our phrases like the water plan, the governor's portfolio, different things. They all kind of stem from here. They plan, design, construct, and operate and maintain the state water project. They regulate dams, provide flood protection, and assist in emergency management. They allegedly work to preserve the natural environment and wildlife. They educate the public about the importance of water and conservation and safety. They provide grants and technical assistance to local water suppliers and needs. And then, lots of data, research, analysis, all that jazz. So what's an EIR? An EIR is an environmental impact report. And the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, you might hear us talking about CEQA sometimes, generally requires state and local government agencies to inform decision makers and the public about the potential environmental impacts of proposed projects and to reduce those impacts to the extent that they can, which I think should be all the way, but all right. If a project subject to CEQA will not cause any adverse environmental impacts, a public agency may adopt a brief document known as got some folks joining us. Cool. All right. And that would be known as a negative declaration if there's no environmental concerns to worry about. If the project may cause adverse environmental impacts, the public agency must prepare a more detailed study, and that's the Environmental Impact Report, or EIR. So sometimes if you've noticed that you'll look through an agenda for like a city council meeting or the Met board meetings that we go to, and they mention CEQA in like every single item, that's because they are saying, okay, this thing is subject to CEQA, so we have to, look into it a little further, or this one isn't. That's right down to things like spending money to upgrade computers for like a water agency. Like pretty much everything kind of has to be a litmus test for CEQA or not. And a key feature of the CEQA process is the opportunity for the public to review and provide input on both negative declarations and environmental impact reports. So this is one of like the biggest things we can do as members of Sierra Club and just the public in general, is just try to get involved and give our opinions on environmental impact reports. Oh, actually, and I also wanted to add that so there is the public draft EIR. If you've been following this closely for a while, you've probably heard me talk about this a lot, that our next big vote will be in 2022 about the public draft EIR, and that's kind of the thing we're gearing up for. However, there's also an administrative draft EIR, and that's something that they don't really release to the public. It's a government thing. We're trying to get our hands on it. We're not really sure when it comes out, probably this summer. And that just kind of gives an indication of what will be coming out in the public draft. But, they're still doing a lot of research and planning and permitting stuff before that gets out there. But that would be helpful for our litigation to know what's in there. And we'll talk more about what we predict is in there and what our concerns are about that. There we go. So the administrative report should come out maybe this year, allegedly this summer. We've heard different things. Our concern is that in the last public mention of the draft EIR, the public version or administrative, That was in January, and they said that there were no real alternatives to the tunnel that they were actually considering. If you were part of the stuff in December, we were saying, hey, you know, we've got to have a true alternative to the tunnel, i.e. no tunnel, but also improvements to the things that are already there. So the levees that are already there, we need to fix them up a little better. We need to work on the subsidence issues, on potential flooding opportunities, all kinds of things, the haves. So it's not enough for us in Sierra Club to say just no tunnel. It's no tunnel, but then also fix up the, oh, perfect. I see that Deirdre is here now. And if anyone can talk about that and extent, Deirdre is the person. So feel free to shower Deirdre in questions at the end. I'm volunteering her for that because I know she can handle them. So, but that's one of the things that we're concerned about, that they said they don't really have a true, or to our liking, that there's no true no tunnel alternative. It looks like everything they're throwing out there is some janky version of a tunnel, whether it's here, there, a different spot, and that's not good enough for us. So what you're looking at right here is our Sierra Club. It's a little excerpt from our litigation where a bunch of our allies joined us in litigation against Department of Water Resources to stop this tunnel. In that top corner over there is a link if you want to read the whole thing. It's actually kind of interesting if you're into this stuff, or it'll help you fall asleep at night. So that kind of goes into this a little bit more. And I think just some other little technical jargon stuff I would add is that the Delta Reform Act, actually you can see that, you can read that for yourself. So yeah, you've got that there. I'm going to talk now about the
can I ask a few quick questions? I'll try to make it quick.
do you think you can put them in the chat and we'll talk about it at the end?
I don't know. I tried using the chat last time and like dictating it and it wouldn't work.
Okay, do you think you can hold on to your question until the end and then you can ask it out loud?
I guess, but I might have to get off because like I have other things I need to do. So
how about one question and we'll see what we have time for.
do you think you can send me the registration links for the MWD comment events and like the date and time that they start?
Girl, when have I ever let you down? Of course I will. Everyone is getting all the links, all the comments, a million reminders, a million emails. I got
so many. And I guess so now there's a better alternative for the tunnel if the tunnel is built. That's what I'm hearing, but I could be wrong.
Not a better alternative if it's built. If it's built, the alternative is no tunnel plus some repairs to the existing infrastructure. Does that make sense? So like there are already levees over there. We got to fix them up. They're falling apart, things like that. So we want no tunnel and then some repairs. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. All right, awesome. So this is what the Department of Water Resources has to say about the tunnel. And then I just added some edits because, you know, it's not quite accurate. So they say that the reality is basically that in that first line where they say it's that the pipeline would modernize the water transport infrastructure. No. Pipelines are not modernizing. Pipelines are, you know, a 20th century invention and structure. Those are just not what we need anymore at this point. Modern would be local water sustainability, water recycling, gray water, brackish desalination, you know, things of the future. So modern is just not the right word there. And then we see that they say that the tunnel would ensure climate resiliency, but you know, come on, how is it climate resilient when we don't have any water? That just doesn't make sense. And then they say that that they mention all these great local water supply projects, but we can do that without the tunnel. We don't need a tunnel to also have these things. We can have regional stormwater capture, water conservation, recycled water, and groundwater management, but we don't need the tunnel. And if they were going to offer it as like a bone that they're throwing us, in addition to the tunnel, I think we see right through that. And we know that we don't need the tunnel. We can do those things without it. Then even if the tunnel were built, it talks about reliability, but that reliability would be uncertain because it doesn't address earthquake vulnerabilities in existing infrastructure, which is why it's kind of hinting there that this tunnel would be our answer to earthquakes and rising sea level change. And we know that's not true. Any water exported through the single tunnel would eventually flow to and through existing water redistribution systems in the South San Joaquins, like the Central Valley area, and throughout Southern California. But, you know, if there's a problem there in any of those, if there's an earthquake or something else, then that's where the water would spill through. So we would be spending $40 billion on this new tunnel, but that water can leak out anywhere past that. So it just doesn't make sense. And a lot of this infrastructure is at a greater risk of earthquake damage than the Delta levees because of things like geographic location, negligent maintenance, who's responsible for maintaining this pipe and that pipe and all the other things. The California Aqueduct crosses through San Andreas faults and other minor faults. The San Luis Reservoir, which is acknowledged by DWR to have a seismic deficiency, that crosses the Oricalita fault, and it's only 28 miles from the San Andreas fault. So it's really just, we keep hearing about these earthquakes and how it's the answer to that, and it's just not true. And then in terms of sea level rise, climate change would bring sea level rise that will lead to more salt water flowing into the delta from the bay. So as the salt water comes in, we need that fresh water to push it out. And if this tunnel is taking the fresh water, and we're not going to be able to push out that salt water, and it doesn't really make any sense. And I'm sure Deirdre would love to talk more about that when we are done with this. So why do we care? Well, I think you've noticed by now that we're opposed to any and all forms of a tunnel in this region. The lack of the freshwater flows in the delta due to these excessive diversions have already led to a lot of loss of natural habitat for species and for livelihoods in the delta community. And it's driven out numerous fish. I mean, we know that the delta smelt is probably going to be extinct this year. And the Sacramento splittail, the longfin smelt, they're all right behind it. Salmon is not that far away. So we need to stop this so that we can decrease, that we don't decrease the amount of fresh water for people living in the delta communities. And you'll probably hear me say that every time you see me, but it's true. So these workshops, what are these workshops all about? So DWR is going to be hosting a series of webinars or workshops in preparation for the draft EIR. And the draft EIR is scheduled to be released in 2022, like we've talked about it, but the webinars are allegedly designed to engage stakeholders and members of the public informed on the development process of this EIR. So each of them are going to include a presentation from their technical staff and then an opportunity for us to ask questions about it and, you know, share our opinions. They do have Spanish translation services if you know people who need that, and closed captioning. I think that we will always push for those things in any public setting. I encourage you to as well. If you are in any kind of public setting where they don't make translation or closed captioning available, you know, that's your right as a resident of California, and you should always ask for those things because we need people to be engaged and have access, right? So the first one is going to be about state water project basics, how the water moves through it, all just kinds of operational things, future challenges and risks to the state water project, models and operations for the Delta conveyance. And they're going to look at those modeling results and interpretation, and hopefully we'll get all of our engineer friends out there to just trash it and say, no, that's nonsense. And we've heard Tom Williams talk in some of our Wednesday meetings about how they're going to be building this concrete tunnel on muck. And, you know, you're going to have all the soft muck trying to hold up concrete. And that just doesn't make sense. So we'll get those kinds of things out there. Then the next one will focus on fisheries, including environmental setting details, the fish species that are being evaluated, their migration patterns, their fish life cycles. I know we have a lot of big fish fans on here, so hopefully all the fish folks can come out and talk about all things fishy. And then they're going to talk about fish screen considerations, which really just breaks my heart. I mean, what a terrible fate to be sucked up into a pump, right? Then the next one will be on climate change, one of my favorite topics, and they're going to talk about their overall climate change planning efforts, including their climate action plan. And I'm excited to see that because they really don't talk enough about climate change modeling. And I feel like they kind of do it to be avoidant, or that they kind of spin the message to say things that they want. So we're always kind of looking out for that sort of stuff. And then how that climate change analysis is related to the Delta Conveyance Project and their current climate change data, which I don't know, everything I've seen them post is a little outdated, if you ask me. And then their final one will be about environmental justice, and they'll talk about their environmental justice survey and the results. I'll probably talk about this a lot over the next few months, but their survey results were not really that accurate. And I think that we definitely want to see more folks from all over the state. We want to see more Black, Indigenous people of color, and we absolutely want to get as many of our tribal allies and friends out there as possible, because this is the time to make sure their voices are heard. So let's talk a little bit about the history of the State Water Project. This is my little watercolor of what I imagine the Delta will look like in 100 years if this tunnel is built. So the State Water Project was Stephen Burge, you are not muted. If you can mute yourself. Stephen. Great.
Sorry about that.
All right, so the State Water Project was established in 1956 by the California State Legislature, and it's DWR's job to protect it, develop, and manage a lot of California's water supply. So this includes the State Water Project, and that's actually the country's largest state-built water conveyance program. And it's also interesting, I think we'll actually do a future info webinar about a little more in detail, because a lot of these water rights were actually created by farmers from the South when they were leaving the Dust Bowl. And that was kind of the basis for a lot of the policy, a lot of the design and location for these things. So when you think about folks who are fleeing the Dust Bowl because they weren't so great about soil erosion and conservation in the first place, and then those folks came here to design all the systems we use now, probably a lot of room for error there, right? So the State Water Project supplies water to about 27 million Californians and 750,000 acres of farmland. The region spans, they say 700 miles. I'm going to say 1,100 miles is more accurate. And they've got 34 storage facilities, 20 pumping plants, and a lot of other engineering things. And the tunnel proponents in DWR have been trying to make this tunnel happen in some form since the 1940s, whether it was as the Peripheral Canal, the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, Water Fix, Twin Tunnels, or now the single tunnel, aka Delta Tunnel, aka Delta Conveyance Plan. And really, I think that a lot of this is just a version of an extension of colonialism. And I think that's something that we will want to talk about more in the next few months, especially as the tribes have gotten a memorandum of understanding to get all the tribes to kind of work together as a force for this. But I think that that's really pretty clear to me that, this is just one more way of taking water from people who were living here first and shuffling it around and kind of rebuilding the entire geography of the land, right? So let's look at what oh, that didn't work. What is DWR's track record like with the State Water Project, with the tunnel, with everything else? So again, you're looking at an excerpt from our litigation with our allies against DWR, looking at the Delta Tunnel and how we're going to stop it. And I think that this little chunk here is a really good kind of timeline. So they've had a lot of models on flooding released to the public. They'll always say, oh, we need to plug up and make all these conveyances because floods are such a huge risk in the Delta. And they are, and they can be. But we also clearly have some concerns about droughts and climate change, and we really don't see the models for that as well, probably because those models don't benefit the Delta Tunnel, and they're not going to put out things there that that are counterintuitive to a project they're trying to build. So that's definitely something we need to see more of. We need to see more modeling on droughts and climate change. Allegedly, we'll see some of those things in these workshops, and hopefully that's the case. So you can see in our litigation, expert agencies, including the State Water Resource Control Board or the Water Board, have concluded that it's necessary to decrease diversions in order to increase Delta outflows. I think that's something we've been saying forever. You got to stop taking the water out of here. So in October 2017, the Water Board found that it's widely recognized that the Delta ecosystem is in a state of crisis. And the water management, including the CVP or the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project or SWP, have been accompanied by significant declines in nearly all species of native fish, as well as other native and non-native species dependent on the aquatic ecosystem. Fish species have continued to experience precipitous declines since the last major update and implementation of the Bay Delta Plan in 1995. And that was intended to halt and reverse the aquatic species declines occurring at the time, but we can see that that's not really the case. In the early 2000s, scientists noted a steep and lasting decline in population abundance of several native fish species, and that's continued to worsen during the recent drought. At the same time, natural production of all runs of Central Valley salmon and steelhead remain near all-time low levels. And like I said, they're probably going to go extinct this year and in the next few years for a lot of these species. In December 2018, the Water Board adopted Bay Delta Plan amendments establishing the lower San Joaquin River flow objectives, and they revised the Southern Delta salinity objectives. Salinity is a huge part of the problem because this water is getting saltier and saltier and making it harder for other species to survive. In July 2016, hi there, we've got somebody who needs to mute. Not sure who it is just yet. All right, I think that did it. Thanks so much. In July 2016, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals had a decision, and they said that the court held that the challenge environmental document issued by the reclamation under the national EPA, it renewed the interim 2-year water contracts and said they did not give full and meaningful consideration to the alternative of a reduction in maximum water quantities. So they recognized at that point that, we really need to do something about how much water is getting pumped out of there and what that means for the Delta. And a lot of things happened. I think one of the big ones was that in May 2019, the petitioners, which include ourselves and all of our allies, submitted written comments, and a lot of you were probably a part of that, and that's awesome. The petitioners asserted that in the draft EIR for the project, DWR must complete the water inventory and assessments and other tasks required by a lot of different executive orders and CEQA, and that they must use their best efforts to find and disclose all that they reasonably can, and then develop reasonable alternatives, including ones that would improve water quality by reducing exports. So like I said, we need to see a true alternative to the tunnel that includes a no tunnel option. So we've got some missing voices in all of this. They are going to talk a bit, especially in the EJ webinar. They'll talk about their EJ survey that just came out. It's really not a true ethnographic study, and I think that's one of our biggest concerns with it. We're not going to get too crazy in public with it right now. We'll include our comments on that in that workshop. But the way, having a survey done during a pandemic, that's really an issue of accessibility, right? How many folks have the internet bandwidth and the cell phone reception and just access to computers to be able to fill it out? When we're not meeting with community groups in person, and people have a lot of other things going on in their lives in the pandemic. So that really presents a barrier. They definitely did not do enough to reach out to Southern Californians. Their focus was definitely on folks who live in the Delta, and that's absolutely important. But Southern Californians are going to be the ones paying for the bulk of it. So as the financiers, we should have a voice too. And then there are groups that did an amazing job of turnout. And there's actually quite a few members of the Chinese fishing population who took the survey, and that's fantastic for them, but that means their voices are a good chunk of the folks represented, and we need to get all kinds of voices. I think we definitely need more tribal voices represented, but folks from all over the state, and that's really important. So who's paying for this? Just like to remind us again that Southern California will be paying for the bulk of this. We learned today in a Met update that Lake Mead storage, at least as of today, should be okay. Water storage should be okay for Southern California through late 2022, but the water in the region of the State Water Project is absolutely drying up, and agencies in the area are relying on transfers, water transfers. So anyone who has water in storage is kind of sharing with their neighbors, and it's a sign that things are not looking good for California. We've already established, if you've been to any of our meetings, that Met is our biggest regional water wholesaler. That's why we bug them so much, because they are one of the biggest groups of water wholesalers representing us. And then they are going to be paying about 65% of this tunnel. So not only do we not want the tunnel to happen, but we want them to listen to what we have to say more than anyone. The tunnel is expected to cost $16 billion up to $40 billion with inflation. And they've already spent $175 million of water ratepayer money on the islands. And then they pledged another $168 million just for the planning of this EIR in December. So it's pretty expensive, and it's not going to give us any more water because, with climate change, there is no new water. It's not a new source of water. It's just moving it around. So here are the workshop details. We will send you a million emails about these and social media posts and call you, and I'll bug you. So don't you worry, you will see this again. But if you just want to take a screenshot or something, these will be the upcoming workshops. And what we need to do now is get ourselves there, get our voices heard, get our neighbors there, and get any of our allies there. So if you are someone who's really into fish, if you're a fish fan, a fish fanatic, you love to go fishing, you work for a fishery, you just like the way they look, we need you there, especially at that fishery meeting. If you're an engineer, we really need you there for all of them, but especially the operations one. If you're a climate scientist or just someone who really cares about climate change, we need you there. And for the environmental justice meeting, I really want to prioritize that Black, Indigenous people of color, and especially folks with a California tribe background are represented. We need to get folks from all over the state and every community there. So you'll hear more about that. And then I'm always going to plug our Facebook group because we have a lot of fun in there too. So it'll be one more way to get involved. So in a nutshell, these are coming up. We will get you talking points. We'll tell you what you need to say. But these are important because these are kind of going to shape the discussion around the upcoming environmental impact report. We don't know what it's going to say yet until the scientists take a look. I mean, maybe Deirdre knows what they're going to say. I don't know. But until we get to that point, we need to make sure our voices are heard and that they know what our current concerns will be. that they know that we don't think it's a great idea to build a heavy concrete tunnel on a bunch of muck, and that, you know, they're going to have to move water and muck and everything else around to do this. So we'll get all of our talking points and concerns to you, but this is going to be a really important part in our fight against this tunnel. So that'll be coming up, and I'm going to stop sharing now, and I will send you all the slides as well. So let's first start with any questions on here for me, or for Deirdre's still here, so she could probably take a stab at some of these. And then after we discuss this thoroughly, if there's any questions about other stuff that's been going on lately that you want to discuss too, go for it. So any questions? So I got a direct message with a great suggestion that that one idea would be covering the canal and lining them, the California Aqueduct and other canals, and lining them. That is, and then the idea of solar panels. And this person said that that idea just came up from UC Merced. I think it's actually been around for a while. A lot of folks have been interested in it. Our new best friend, I shouldn't say that, but someone we really support right now, Adel Haja-Khalil, who just became general manager of Met. He's really excited about the prospect of covering the canals with solar panels. That's something he's really interested in. Some of our folks, our members, have said that they don't like the idea because it's still going to require a lot of energy to get the juice and the energy from the solar panels over to whatever it is that needs the juice. I still kind of think it's worth it anyway, but it's certainly something to discuss. And that's a great idea. I think that while that's one way to conserve water, we still need to stop this tunnel from happening, and we can just add that to a list of all of the ways that we are trying to conserve water and become reliant on ourselves, on local water sustainability. So yeah, it's one awesome idea for sure. And then no, I don't want all the questions in the chat. That was just while I was talking, but now you can unmute yourselves, talk, have a little chat going. Deirdre, do you have
Okay, I have a question. Is there, typically there's a committee type a group of people with wide-ranging knowledge who respond to these EIRs in the Sierra Club, both locally and statewide particularly. And I was wondering if that committee has already been established, and if so, do we know who will be included in that committee?
question? Yeah, so Sierra Club California does have a technical committee, and that's why I keep calling on Deirdre, because she's a member of that, as well as Tom Williams and a lot of other really brilliant folks. I'm sure they'll definitely take a look at everything and give comments and feedback. Our policy folks will give comments and feedback, our director, myself, but we also want to hear from everyone. We want all of the public to get out there and share what their concerns are. I think that the technical part is absolutely critical when we can break down an analysis of, you know, this thing's going to be too heavy, this is going to be a gap, this isn't going to make sense in a dry season. But I also think it's important to hear the local social concerns too. You know, this is going to ruin my business, this is going to destroy our cultural traditions, all of those kinds of things. So yeah, we want anyone who not only knows about the tunnel and engineering and construction in the Delta, but who also just cares about it, to get out there and have your voices heard, for sure.
It's Deirdre. I also wanted to say, so Bob Wright, who's the Sierra Club's attorney, typically works fairly closely with Restore the Delta and some other folks to write some legal comments. And he's a big so the California, the big legal challenge is going to be under the California Environmental Quality Act, and they're going to look for things they didn't analyze and so on.
Let me pause you there and just fill in that, yeah, those excerpts that we were looking at, those were written by Bob. Bob is working on stuff now. Not sure how much I'm going to say about Bob because we're recording this, but yeah, he's been looking at the fact that the true alternative, as we're calling it, has not been included and that it needs to be under a wide variety of laws. And then a couple of our allies are kind of looking at different angles too, which I don't think we can really talk about too much just yet, but there are a lot of different ways to kind of attack this thing here.
Yeah. So one of the things to do when you're making comments is to sort of look at, you can do sort of a shotgun approach, but another thing is to look at sort of the points you want to make. And usually when I do expert work on an EIR, I work fairly closely with the attorneys who are going to actually be doing the case. Yeah.
Deirdre, do you have any opinions just already what you think ahead of time you might say, or some concerns you know you want to bring up going in?
I have, so I was the one who did testimony about climate change in the water fix hearing, and we did win on best available science that they used. So the Delta Reform Act requires that they use best available science, and we won that they hadn't used best available science on sea level rise. It's the biggest vulnerability. That the maximum estimates of sea level rise have almost doubled since the tunnel was first designed, and they hadn't analyzed it for 2 meters of sea level rise. They may try to just get around that by just saying, oh, our EIR only goes through 2065, so we'll just look at high sea level rise at 2065. And that's an issue, but that's what the state water contractors have been going on and doing. And the other issue is their climate change modeling. They originally were going to deal with uncertainty by they had, the warmer, wetter scenarios, cooler, wetter scenarios, warmer, drier, cooler, drier, slightly, not as warm. It wasn't really cooler, not as warm, drier. And the warmer, drier scenarios were really, some of them were really low flows, and they just dropped all that and used the kind of the average of all the models. And the problem with that is it just threw out what we're seeing now. So I did testify about that in the water fix hearing, and I don't know if they've done a new analysis. They did hire the original climate scientists for DWR, weren't that good. They didn't have them. They've now hired Andrew Schwartz is really good. So it may not be as easy. I really did challenge it before, and it is a huge issue that they're not adequately looking at risk, and there's some new science as well. So
That's a really
I
good
can
point.
help with that going
Okay.
forward. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we're seeing that with Met, that they've spent a good year on their integrated resources plan, their IRP, which is kind of their long-term 20 plus year plan. They've been looking at the different drivers and scenarios of hot, cold, wet, dry, big population, less population, populations moving, all of that. And I think that's absolutely critical to knowing every type of scenario. If you just take an average of all of that, it's just kind of like throwing away all of that data and that hard work. And we just need to be prepared for every scenario. And I kind of wonder if they're doing that because they know that all of the outliers are becoming much more likely. Our outlier scenarios where, we will have very extreme temperatures and extreme loss of water, but if you just make it an average, it doesn't look quite so scary. But the truth is, the future is very scary right now.
There is total cherry picking of the climate science. Anything that's inconvenient to the project gets pushed to one side, or they bias the analysis. And I saw where they biased the analysis. And it's one of the reasons also I'm pushing very hard to try to preserve the independent science board to do a review, because those scientists have the credentials, and we did quote them a lot before.
I see a hand raised after this person speaks. Deirdre, do you want to come back to the Delta Independent Science Board issues and update everyone on
Sure.
that a little more?
That would be
Great.
great.
Phone number ending in 8800. You have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. This is Nancy Okada, and hi, Deirdre. Anyways, I had two questions. One is, what is the status of Locke in the Delta? Have they dug the tunnels all around it? Are they going to try and save it or whatever? And then the second question would be, it appears that there are these desalination plant ideas regarding brackish water popping up also in the Delta around that area, or at least there's promotion of that. I'm going to listen to a presentation later this evening on that. And I was wondering if, you know, how that fits in. So, two questions. Thank you.
Sure. The brackish desalination, I think generally we support brackish desalination, but for the Delta region specific, I think that might get tricky and complicated, especially because it's really being overutilized right now with the drought. So actually, if you want to check back in with us after the next presentation you're going to and let us know, that would be fantastic. And then I'll just email everyone if you find something interesting. And then what was the first part? What area did you say?
Locke, I can answer that. So the tunnel originally, the Twin Tunnels project was routed just to the east of Locke and Walnut Grove. And Locke is this really amazing historic Chinese town. The entire town is on the National Historic Register. It's the best preserved example of a historic rural Chinese town. And they, the new eastern alignment is much better for Locke, but it's not clear. Even though the eastern alignment is supposedly preferred, my suspicion is that Metropolitan Water District bought Bolden Island and these other islands and for the Twin Tunnels project, and they want to go through Bolden. The eastern alignment is also better because it doesn't go right through Staten Island where the Sandhill cranes are. And they have done a lot in terms of traffic and not routing traffic along River Road and Highway 160, which would just destroy Locke. So they are proposing to construct more access roads, and that would be better. Yeah, if they keep the eastern route, it's going to be very near Locke, and there's real issues with impacts on the North Delta towns. The current intake too will just completely destroy the little historic town of Hood.
Well, yeah, my thought was that, you know, maybe that would be worth a webinar on Locke and just how, you know, it fits into this. You know, they're basically destroying all the history and coming in, and, you know, just the whole idea of the destruction that's going on in the name of what? It's absolutely crazy, as well as, you know, the whole, there's an interest in Asian American history, and there could be, you know, you could try and you know, just raise awareness on that, plus talking to the people in Locke. Although I'm sure there aren't too terribly many people
I
left.
know, and I've worked with the people in Locke. That was the other thing that we got. We got the tunnel remanded, and I started working with the people in the historic towns and helped do that. But part of it was the impact on the North Delta towns. And we got the governor to give a directive to limit the impacts on Delta legacy towns and fish. And the problem was people just decided, well, you know, it's not exactly a problem, but people decided they weren't going to engage on that. And we did. And so it's going to be a kind of a problem because there was this whole consultation to limit the impacts, and there just isn't the kind of testimony in the record that we would need to challenge that again. So, but
Well,
yeah,
because I know some people down here connected with China Camp in San Rafael who, you know, when I told them they didn't know anything about it, Chinese, you know, descendants. And
how about if I
the-
put them, I know Doug Shaw, who's Chinese American, and he's on the Locke Foundation, and he's now leading the Locke, but he was the representative for Locke on the stakeholder engagement committee. So
That would be great.
yeah, I mean, if you could pass it on to me, I can pass it on to the other people.
yeah,
But
it would
just
be
seems to
great.
me we could, in terms of getting public awareness, you know, the idea of a tunnel and how boring is a tunnel and water and all that stuff. You know, apart from, you know, the other side, cultural, historical significance of these places, people don't know that. And now that people are, you know, exploring more around their own areas, they may be more interested.
Yeah,
and therefore,
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a really good idea, and I did a whole lot of work with them. And I can put you guys. I shared a blog that I wrote. There's also a Chinese American on Nai Sua on the Valley Water Board, and I wrote something about Locke around the time that the vote was happening, and I actually paid to do a Facebook advertisement on the east side of San Francisco Bay and Milpitas and so on, where she's around, because there's a very heavy Chinese community, and we did get a lot of engagement. But we could really use my blog post, and I'll put you in touch with Doug. And yeah,
Okay,
that's a
because
great idea,
that-
because the heritage
that must have
really
been
means a lot.
at least a couple of years ago, Deirdre, because it was when there were still two tunnels. I mean, because I know that's when I was talking to these people.
It's
But
the
anyhow,
same
yeah.
route. They just put a single tunnel in the water fix footprint and added access roads. That's basically what it is. It's still the same project. It's one fewer intake and a single tunnel and access roads instead of clogging everything up.
All right. It looks like we've
Okay,
got
yeah,
two
well-
more. We've got two other questions there. Sydney, do you want to ask your question?
I wanted to say something. So, I didn't even know this, but you guys brought up a good point. So if in fact the tunnel is going to be built on top of muck, which is heavy cement on top of muck, first of all, I have a grave concern about that. We're going to spend $40 billion to build this tunnel, which most likely is going to collapse within a short amount of time, because we're putting something heavy on something that's softer. And I want to tell that to those who are in charge of pushing this tunnel. And also that $40 billion that is so high of a chance it's going to be potentially wasted. This $40 billion could be used to invest in, you know, more robust COVID recovery, climate recovery, sustainability, like, I don't know, cleaning up the environment, building barriers near coastlines because of sea level rise. We could be building a more coastally resilient environment where, like, if in fact there's this big earthquake that is gonna, you know, they're predicting if we get a mini tsunami or whatever, if we build walls or somewhere where the coast meets, like maybe that can help with
Maybe,
reducing the destruction.
Maybe we'll do a little campaign of all the things we could do with $40 billion. That's a great idea. Yeah, you know what?
Cool.
Email me about that. Maybe we'll make that our next action committee action. You always have great ideas, Cindy.
Oh, thanks.
Cynthia, you had a question? Cynthia? Cindy?
Oh, are you talking to me or somebody else? I'm sorry.
Someone else, yeah. Cynthia, aka Cindy. I don't know if you're talking, but you're muted. But you have your hand up. All right, maybe we lost Cynthia. Deirdre, did you want to touch on the Delta?
I just had something to say. So I did work with Tom Williams in the water fix hearing, and we put on his testimony. And The tunnels are kind of buoyant, but the thing is, there's a joint every 5 feet. So basically there's these segments, there's these little circles, they bolt them together. And then every 5 feet, there's a joint like this, and they bolt them together. And if the bolts aren't strong enough, then they can sort of settle a little bit over time. And as the cracks open up and the water comes in and out, if they're bedded on silt, the silt washes out, and then you have cavitation under it. And this is what actually happened in Shanghai. And I do have a blog post about it. It's a little technical, but they built these subway tunnels in Shanghai, and they're having a shortened lifetime. And yeah, and we found out the design assumptions they used for the tunnels were used based on tunnels in rock. And it's like, I'm sorry, that's not the way these are going to act, and you're not considering the forces enough. So they're lowballing the project. Basically, don't make the bolts strong enough, and then it'll be cheaper, and then you can construct this big thing, and it's Oroville spillway bad, you know. So that was some of our testimony, and also saying that there was strong an earthquake. They assumed that all the ground was very dense to hard, and it wasn't. It was a lot softer. It wasn't quite, muck is maybe overstating it, but it's certainly silt, sandy silt and salty sand, and their earthquake analysis was deeply flawed as well. So yeah, it's a boondoggle. It's hype, and they start out thinking they want to build it, and the engineering is deeply flawed as well. And you know, that's another thing. The independent science board members said, you know, oh, what about the engineering? You know, I'm like, oh man, I hope you get to look at that. Because when we looked at it before, it was bad, and it just costs money. I mean, the problem with Oroville Dam was, the reason they cut corners on the spillway was they wanted the biggest possible dam they could build, you know, and they couldn't quite afford it. So they cut corners, and that's what you end up with. So 40 years later, is you know, spillway almost failing. So, yeah.
Yeah, Tom was
If you would
telling
like
us.
me to comment, I'm back in the right screen now.
Yeah.
Hi, Dedra. It's good to see you again. I was wondering, particularly back when there was a wetlands committee that there was 3 of us statewide working on. We were trying to coordinate with the water committee Bay Delta group to interface with wetland issues on the Delta projects. And I was wondering if you can address that, where things are at. Are they, have wetlands been covered? Is there a separate group looking particularly at that, since they're so highly litigated?
I would really hope, so sort of what's been going on is the Sierra Club, we're not really, the water committee, when I was first on the water committee, because we went through years of it, there was an environmental water caucus, and also the water committee was more included in the loop. And then the environmental water caucus sort of fell apart, and they're just like, the people, I'm still a member, and the facilitator signs out the comments that I never even see. So it's sort of like the water committee, we have to define a role for the volunteers on the water committee. And, I would like to have a role. I know I work with Bob on putting together the Sierra Club California case and the water fix hearing, and it's good for an expert to do that before you get to actually testifying. But I'll have to see. I think there's an amazing amount of knowledge and talent on the committee. So, but yeah, usually the comments are written by Tim Stoshane, who's Restore the Delta's staff person. But the last ones were.
Are you referring to the Bay chapter, the Bay Delta chapter? by any chance? Because actually that was kind of a sleepy chapter, not chapter, but a sleepy group, and it's now come alive. In the Bay chapter, there's the Delta group that's over in that area.
I'm working pretty closely
Actually,
in the Bay chapter.
Arthur,
Okay, so
yeah,
Arthur
you're working with Paul
Feinstein
Seeger?
was-
yeah,
Okay, so then you know about, because
yeah.
Paul,
And
I
then
mean, because
Arthur
this
has
is
a whole
always,
sea level rise committee that's doing its own thing. So
right, Arthur has, I don't know what his
I
is doing,
I
but
think it's not something. I think we should have a discussion, sort of not offline, a little bit about how to integrate volunteer efforts. But I think maybe it'd be good to have a conscious thing. We got presented with, some comments by Brandon, I think in 2015. It was like, here they are. And I was like, gee, it would have been nice if we could have had some input into drafting them. So it'd be nice if we could figure out, maybe the Sierra Club Water Committee could do some of their own supplemental. I don't know, but it might be.
You should loop in Carol Steinfeld and Molly Cullen on that too. If you're gonna do something like that, that sounds good. Sounds important. Like you need.
Yeah.
I had a question. What was the first names of the Resnicks? Because I was thinking maybe that, I don't know if I can, but I was thinking about emailing the Resnicks because I remember we were talking about.
I remember when you brought that up a few weeks ago. Sydney had an idea that we could try an emotional appeal to the Resnick family to stop spending so much money lobbying for this. We have someone looking into that politically because they are funding other good projects, and we want to be careful not. Yeah, we want to be careful not to like make a bigger mess. So we'll put a pin in it.
So maybe they're not like that bad of people. They just have some
I think
flaws.
that they just their priorities are different from ours is one way to look at it. And we will figure out what kind of makes sense, but we haven't given up on that. We've just put a pin in it for now. It was a very interesting idea. I think you're more optimistic than the rest of us.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing with the
I don't know
Kohler
about
company
that.
on another issue. Anybody know any place where the Kohler company is? Please text me.
Kohler company.
what?
Yeah, I'm
Kohler,
working on it.
KOHL. I don't know if
the toilet people.
Who is that? The toilet.
Faucets
Who is
sinks.
that? Because we've got a water board member up here in Marin who's I don't know if she's related to them or not, but anyways, that's her name. If you look at the Marin Municipal Water District, you'll see Cynthia Kohler, and you could try and find out if she's related to them.
They're mostly in Wisconsin.
Well, you never know.
Oh, right. And they're a powerful family, just like the rest, even more so than the Resnicks. But anyway, I digress. But yes, as far as, a personal campaign on the movers and shakers, one thing that has done well in some of the wetland issues I've worked on, big, huge campaigns against big, huge corporations like Cargill, is to appeal to their better angels. And then at least you've started out on instead of, coming out with guns blazing, it's a progressive thing. You don't want to shoot all your shot, on the first battle. So anything we can do, to work it up is, smart.
Yeah, definitely.
Thing.
I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of us are just jaded and pessimistic, but I mean, they support a lot of Democrat causes. They've donated more to Cal Poly than any, they gave the biggest donation to Cal Poly than any other school donation in the world in history. So I think that there could be some wiggle room there. They just need to kind of see the bigger implications of their actions. So yeah, we'll see.
This is Deirdre, and I just want to say, working with the Independent Science Board, We had to be
Can I
very
give
careful.
everyone an update too on what's
Oh,
happening with
yeah,
them?
so it's really suspicious, but in April of 2020, the Delta Independent Science Board sent a comment letter on the notice of preparation for the Delta Tunnel and said, we plan to exercise rigorous scientific review over the project. And 2 days before the letter was officially sent, they started to convert them to employee positions where they would only work 20 hours a month, 5 hours a week, and they would never do an in-depth review again. And there was also a provision in Delta Reform Act to fund through contracts the work on, the review of DVCP, and that mandated that DWR consult on BDCP. So the Delta Stewardship Council attorney put into their review guidelines, the operating guidelines for the Independent Science Board, that the consultation on the BDCP water fix project was finished. Bam, end of legislative mandate. And the only reason, and then it got worse, starting July 1st, they completely canceled they had a bunch of contracts that were going to be renewed, and they just suddenly withdrew them. And they lied to everybody about why they withdrew them, said it was the Department of General Services wouldn't approve them because of the new labor law. And it wasn't the case at all. We later found that out. So anyway, they have been working, they worked without any compensation at all for 5 months. And then they said, oh, we'll pay you $100 per day, when you're in board meetings or if you do some work. And it's just token amounts of money. If they do 8 hours of work, it's less than minimum wage. And the activity of the board is ground to a halt. And one of the members just finally quit because the situation was still not resolved. And I have background, I did research at national labs and I've worked with world-class scientists before. So, I've been trying to step in and save them. My husband is an academic administrator and knows a lot. And they just completely yanked all their funding too. They didn't give them any more staff, even though the chair of the board asked for them. He's like, oh, we can't give you, oh, sorry, our hands are tied. We can't pay you. No, we can't give you any more staff. And I'm like, this is crap. So that's what I've been doing. And we've been pushing really hard. But it's clearly political. And we've heard, the governor's office isn't supportive of the board continuing. We're worried that DWR is quietly pushing for this. So the legislature is trying to get a bill to get the contracts reinstated, and that's going to be passing. It's passed the Assembly appropriations today. It'll pass out of the Assembly floor July 14th, but then there's still going to be a fight to restore, full contract hours. So they can actually look at the tunnel project. So it's just gutting independent science in the Delta and independent review of DWR. And there's a lot of parts, the climate change, the engineering. There's problems with the adaptive management project too. And so I've been spending all my time for the last couple months doing whatever I could. And the Sierra Club has been supportive too, and Brandon's offered to help. So thank you. And also there's I'd like to send out an email if people could send a note of encouragement. The Independent Science Board is going to meet on July 13th and consider the vacancy and how to go forward. And if we could all just tell them, hey, hang in there, we're rooting for you. I think it would mean something because there is a concern that more of the members could quit.
Yeah, absolutely. Put that in our Facebook group, and then if you want to send that to me, I'll share that with our list too.
That would be great. Thank you.
All right, we're 20 minutes over, and that's fine. Any other urgent questions? All right, well, thanks so much, folks, for joining us. if you know anyone who wanted to be here and had to miss out, I'm going to do the same one again tomorrow at 2:00 because didn't have enough heads up with the 4th of July weekend. And then you're going to see all over the state in the next week or two, we'll get out the alerts about how to take action and call in for the workshops. And then we'll also keep you up to date on anything else that happens. The MET meetings are next week. So if anything juicy comes out of that, we'll let you know. Cynthia, do you have one last thing to say?
Is it still timely? I've just started getting the information on the tribal input because I didn't have any background information on that to send a letter on that.
You know what? You could put a pin in it. So yeah, that's a good question. Tribal update. So the Met gave a presentation, or DWR gave a presentation to Met a few weeks ago about tribal engagement, and it was cringy, and they didn't actually include any members of the tribe, any tribes, to be there, be a part of it. And they said, I didn't know my name was on their slideshow. No one ever talked to me about it. So that kind of, we had some strong words and conversation, and we are we're now in talks with DWR's tribal policy advisor, and we're going to talk to them about much better ways to communicate with tribes. And then Met board members are working with us to also do a subcommittee on tribal engagement just for Met's board. And that's really exciting. We're going to start talking about that next week. And then that also started a conversation. It turned into a couple of conversations, which is really exciting. There are tribal issues within Met Water District, including some concerns in Los Cerritos wetlands, and then also how tribal members are being treated in the desert. So they're going to discuss that. But then I'm also going to have a specific focus on Delta tribes and what we're going to be doing about that. So as that happens, we'll definitely keep you updated, and then ways to get folks engaged, ways to push Met a little harder, which, you know, Adele just started, and he's got his work cut out for him, because we're going to need the board members to be supporting what he does too. So this is just one more way we can get everyone working together. So yeah, so Cynthia, hold on to that, put a pin in it, and then let's talk after I meet with that board member and we figure out where we're going next with this. So, but thank you for doing that. That's awesome.
All right, can you contact me offline? I've got the presentation lined up to watch tonight. So
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, no problem. All right. Well, thanks, folks. I'm going to stop recording.